So, I'm in a recovery group, and a woman in this recovery group that I'm in came up to me one day and asked if I would befriend her 16-year-old daughter who had a hard time making friends. I agreed, and I didn't see much harm in it. I was 21 at the time and thinking of going into teaching anyway, and it seemed harmless enough. So, I met the girl and began to include her in outings with my group of friends. She seemed okay at first, and I thought that she was just really quiet. She began to open up to me and shared some of her struggles, and it seemed like she had a pretty hard life. I tried to be as supportive as I could, though. The more she was around, though, the stranger her behavior seemed to grow. When she was around me, she began to barely say anything at all, in fact, and would just stare at me in this mouth-breathing kind of way. But when we were apart, she would text and call me incessantly. She began to have frequent crisis moments too, seeking attention and asking me to come around to her aid. The last crisis that she had was a text message claiming that she had just been in a car accident. I called her mother about this, only to find out that the whole thing was just completely made up and had not happened. This whole thing began to be overwhelming, and I started to back off. When I backed off, the calls and the texts just blew up. I started finding small gifts that were left at my door in my car, and one of these was a burnt CD that she had written that contained all our songs on it. When I looked around my apartment, I found that a number of my small trinkets had gone missing too. She later confessed that she had taken a few things and hoped that I didn't mind, so she could be able to remember me when I wasn't around. The last thing that happened before I just finally told her to just stop contacting me, period, was an excited text where she claimed that she had just gotten a car, and including a license plate that was just like mine, and she was coming to my college campus to find me. I didn't believe it until I was sitting on the steps of a building near the main loop, and here she came, indeed, in a car complete with a license plate that was nearly identical to mine. That completely freaked me out, and I'll never forget the phone call that I made to her telling her that there would be no more contact. She was sobbing and screaming over and over, "You don't understand, you just don't understand." I contacted the police, who told me that all they could do was call the girl themselves and tell her to just stay away. They did that, and after a few more times when she made up new AIM names to try and reach me, she did finally go away. A few weeks later, someone else from my university reached out to me and said that this girl had apparently been going around and saying in some LGBT support group that I was her girlfriend. The girl from my university knew of me and knew that there was no way that this was true too. She also revealed to me that she had been through near exactly what I had been through with this girl, just trying to be a friend, and the friendship being taken to this whole other creepy level where it just did not belong. It was really shocking, to say the least, to hear from someone who had been through what I'd been through that it was pretty much exactly the same. I no longer live in this city, thank God, and I never heard from the stalker girl again, but it seemed like she just moved on from one fixation to another after it all ended with me. Anyway, just be careful who you're nice to, and thanks for listening. I had a stalker from Xbox Live try to find me at work 2 days ago on Monday. I'm only 17 and work second shift at my local movie theatre. This is all relevant later. So, it was Friday night and my weekend had just begun. I was on Xbox Live and playing Overwatch and eating now-cold pizza like lots of my friends were. I was kicking considerable ass, more than I usually was at this game, and I was on fire for 3 matches. At around 2 AM, I decided to step up my game and go into competitive mode. I got into a match at King's Row and I was playing Pharaoh in defense, and I got a 15-player kill streak, but I noticed 5 of those kills were on the same guy, a Bastion. The match goes on for about another minute, and then I get an invite to a party. The gamer tag was the same as the Bastion I just killed for the 6th time. I was in a party, and since all of my friends had called it a night except for me at that point, I decided that whatever he wanted to say could be interesting, so I had him. Now, I usually expect some kids a few years younger than me to be shit-talking me, but to my surprise, it was a grown man on the other end. And more to my surprise, he sounded like he was in his 30s, rather than closer to my age, and he had a thick Spanish accent. Immediately, this guy starts cussing me out too. I can't lie when I say that I half expected this to happen when I got a party invite, but whatever. So now, I have the mentality of, if you're a jerk to me, I'll return the favor, and I replied with the classic, "Oh, you mad, bro?" But the guy doesn't acknowledge what I say, and instead of saying the usual shitposting kind of response, he actually threatens to kill me and my mother and my family. I was sort of shocked by this, but it didn't last, and I just told the guy to take a chill pill, but he responded with, "No, I want to." He stopped mid-sentence, and I noticed why. A diva on our team had just killed his Bastion hero again, and now this is where things got scary. It sounded as if he turned into a rabid animal that was trying to suffocate itself on the mic, and screaming and howling and spitting, all at the same time. It's difficult to describe exactly what the sound he was making, but that's the closest I can do. Just inhumane noises were coming from his person, as if he was being gutted and possessed by a demon at the same time or something. And, mind you, this is a grown man too, which made the entire thing scary compared to laughing my ass off when a 12-year-old loses it. Anyway, the match ended and the enemy team didn't even get the payload moving, and the man loses his shit some more because he lost. Then, I decided to be an asshole again and not take this clearly crazy guy's shit. I basically told the guy that he sucked at the game and he was acting like a child and to grow up. And then, the Spanish guy just hollered "fuck you" into the microphone for, no joke, 20 seconds. It started getting all crackly, in fact, and he was being so loud that he was breaking his mic, I think. He then removed me from the party, and I decided that since the match was over, I would just call it a night, just like my friends had. My overall reaction to what went down was, okay, that was something, I guess. So I logged off and turned off my Xbox and just went to bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I realized how much of a dumbass I was for not recording any of it, to be honest. My friends would have fucking lost it when they heard it. But then, I just fell asleep. Saturday went by with nothing, and I thought that was it with the pissed Spanish guy. Sunday came, and I logged into my Xbox that morning to play more Overwatch. And I noticed that I had a message from the guy saying, "Good morning," and my full name. And he also said that, "I know you have to go to the address of my movie theater tomorrow." What the fuck? I decided to pull out my phone and take a picture of the TV screen, and I then texted my boss about it and told her that some guy on the Xbox somehow found out where I worked. Now, my boss is a bitchy old lady, so she naturally didn't care what happened on the Xbox. Even though it concerned my work, she just blew it off and told me that I still had to come in the next day. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and The Incredibles 2 are both hot right now, so we're going to be busy. I end up coming in the next day at 5:30, and it was pretty boring and busy like I predicted too, up until about 8 when a super short guy came in through the door. It was loud and pretty crowded, but the guy fucking hollers my name. Same thick Spanish accent from Xbox too. And oh fuck, it was him. I still to this day don't know where he got my info from or why he decided to come all the way out to where I worked, but the theater fell silent. I just walked to the back room where my boss was and told her that the guy from the Xbox was inside. She repeated the whole, "I don't care what happens to you on Xbox, get back to work, we're busy" shit. And then I repeated to her that the guy was inside the building. I didn't know if he wanted to hurt me or not, but I actually ended up calling the cops. It wasn't until they arrived and spoke to me privately in the back room that my boss ended up taking me seriously. The Spanish guy was still inside the lobby and the cops put him in cuffs and walked him out. This is according to my boss. I was in the back room, so I couldn't witness it. I still haven't heard anything from the cops, and I still don't know how he found my info or why he came all the way to where I worked, and I still don't know what he planned to do to me. But either way, I'm still a bit shaken up over it. I don't know if he knows my home address or not either, and I'm pretty much on guard 24/7 now. Either way, I own 2 dogs that can scare off anyone, but I'm still pretty terrified of this guy. Oh, and by the way, I contacted my police department and I heard they'd taken the guy on Monday, so I have the satisfaction of knowing he didn't get away. They're still being stingy on information, which is odd to me, and won't even tell me his name because of all the security garbage, but I'm waiting for a full police report on this, and they promised that they would give me one soon. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I'm just going to try and not focus on this guy for now. I don't really know where to begin, but I suppose it started before I was born. My birth set in motion a series of actions that led to the threat on my life beyond my control. So, pre my existence, my mother Jane dated an older guy called James when she was in her mid-teens. He adored her, but wasn't of the same religion as her, so she ended up marrying a gentleman from her congregation instead, leaving James rather put out. A year after being married, Jane birthed me and decided that she was unhappy with my father, Dave, and contacted James with intent to go back to him. So Jane packed a bag one night, took me, and left. As soon as she arrived at James's house, she was bombarded with messages from Dave, telling her that he would take full custody of me if she didn't return. So, with a heavy heart, she chose me over James. And therein lies my problem. She went back to my father, and after another year of failed attempts, they divorced and my mother moved south to be with family, completely forgetting about James, mind you. But my childhood, well, it was fairly normal for the next 13 years. A few house moves, a new stepdad, and a few siblings. Mother's second marriage falls through and she's single again. The year is 2010 and she's just discovered Facebook. Being newly single and having sudden contact with all of her old school friends, she quickly strikes up a few romances out of nostalgia. Nothing sticks though, until she finds him. James has a Facebook account. Not very active and no profile picture, but Mum is sure it's him and immediately falls in love again. He comes down south and meets us kids and stays for my 16th birthday party. He looks wise. He's easily in his 50s with shaved grey hair, balding on top, glasses, and a really creepy-ass grin if you ask me. So far, not too bad, I guess. So, why am I posting this here? How does this involve me and not wanting to meet this guy again? Well, when my mum leaves him a third time, he finally flips and the crazy comes out to play. He starts turning up at the house uninvited. He's told to leave every time, and the visits become less frequent, and we think maybe he's got the message. But then, hand-delivered letters start arriving from my mum, and it's the contents of these letters that causes me alarm. In them, he details how if she had never met my father, they could have been happy together, and he had a plan to get her back that was ruined by the untimely arrival of me. So he did what any crazy man would do and started plotting to get me out of the picture. After all, I am the reason she went back to Dave, wasn't I? Back in 1995, she had a near miss of a car accident, with baby me in the car, when a car clipped her at a junction. She didn't get the car's details, but put it down to chance. In the letters, James tells her that the incident 15 years ago, it was him, and that he won't miss this time. He informs her that he still believes that there's a chance for them, but only with me out of the picture. I'm not a baby anymore, and my father is well and truly out of the picture, but The crazy in James's brain won't let it go. The next letter informs my mother that he's told social services that she's drunk and that they'll come and take me away. That's not hard to prove that one was false, so we don't panic. The next letter tells her that he's going to burn down the house. If he can't have her, no one else will. This one she takes to the police. Upon investigation, it's revealed that an ex of James, with the same first name as my mother, mind you, has a restraining order against him for stalking and attempted arson. We're put on high alert and the process for a restraining order is begun. A few nights later, Mum hears someone outside the house too. Thinking it's him, she calls the police immediately and they arrive within 5 minutes and search the street. There's no James, but his car is found behind the resident garages. He doesn't return to it that night. The next day, the police contact a woman's hostel in a neighbouring county. They have a room spare, so we pack our bags and head there. And so, that summer of my life was spent in hiding. No friends, no social media, nothing. Well, I wasn't supposed to have social media, but they're using proxy servers on the computer in the teens' rec room. I was the only teen in the hotel at this point. It was easy enough to get onto. And possibly very stupid too. Because James began messaging me through my Facebook, playing nice, telling me that he loved my mum and needed to know that she was okay. I ignored him and blocked his account, and I had a number of fake accounts try to befriend me and they were all blocked also. After 3 months, they find us a new house and we have a week to go back and pack up our old lives. So that's what we do. And now, it's 8 years later and I've moved several times since, including for uni, and honestly, haven't given much thought to the man who wanted to kill me so that he could be with my mother. 2 years ago, I moved back up north not far from my birthplace, and 2 weeks ago, I received an old email account for a rental agreement. At first, I thought it was spam, but upon opening it, the name at the top read James Smith, and the rental address, it was not too far from me, only a town away in fact. In other words, that sick fuck gave my email to the renters as his so that I would know that he was nearby. I haven't heard anything else since then, but I seriously hope that James and we never meet again. So I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of situations that I encountered, but one in particular, it still makes my skin crawl more than any other. I was born and raised in Texas, but had moved to New York when I was 21. When I found out at the beginning of a week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night arriving when he got off work. And the following day, we were going to meet up with our dad, who lived about an hour away, I think. So I get to the hotel downtown, and the crew and I check in, and then we each head off to our rooms. It's a short elevator ride, and I get to mine where, not even 5 minutes later, there's a loud, hard knock on the door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m, and I hadn't called either my dad or brother to let them know that I was in town yet, so they wouldn't have known what room I was in. I assumed that it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to the door. Before even making it to the door, however, there was a loud male voice on the other side, booming. The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in, before he tried to open the door. He started yelling, "Unlock the door and open up, miss. I need in, now." I froze in my tracks because I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet, let alone called anyone to the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I take no shit from anyone despite my size, I still err on the side of caution. Slowly inching toward the door to look out the peephole, All I could tell was that the man on the other side was at least 6 feet tall and easily over double my weight. In other words, there was no way in hell that I was about to unlock that door. I responded to the guy, telling him that he must have the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed in and was getting in the room one way or the other, and I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab the phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone up to my room, nor had they received a call about the bathroom. And the entire time, this guy was still determined to get into my room, pounding and yelling to let him in. Lucky for me, the front desk had dispatched security to my floor. When the security officer stepped off the elevator, a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hall approach and ask the guy who he was and what he was doing and telling him that he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive toward them, and the front desk clerk that I'm still on the phone with tells me that the police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared shitless. Long story short, though, the cops show up pretty quickly and manage to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or some shit. But I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to a string of break-ins and violent sexual assaults in Austin. He had been seen stalking me from the minute that I entered the hotel lobby, and apparently I was exactly his type of victim. Okay, so he wasn't my uncle, but he was my biological aunt's brother-in-law. My mum used to date sketchy guys when I was a teenager, and I didn't live with her because she was a horrible role model. So my grandmother raised me for a big chunk of my life. I'm thankful for that because she taught me so many values and how to be a lady and all that type of stuff. But I later moved in with my dad and stepmom and half-siblings when I was 15, and I had a wonderful life with them. But when I was 14, I lived with my mother and her skeezy boyfriend Dale for a year in the upper half of a duplex. Her boyfriend had this friend that would come over very occasionally that looked just like the white guy from the Jerky Boys. He had the same hair and everything too, and he creeped me out a bit because he would always just stare at me, and I would always catch him creepily staring at my ass and breasts. And my aunt lived down the block that I would visit quite frequently because she was the cool aunt. She was in her 20s, super fun and really pretty, and she had a 1969 Firebird convertible that we would drive around in and blast Aerosmith in. This was in the 90s, mind you. So, with that said, I saw her brother-in-law Jeff quite a bit because he was renting out her basement. I thought that he was kind of weird, but an okay guy, I guess. So one night, at about 11:30 or midnight, I was home alone and I get a knock on the door. Our door had a square glass panel towards the top that was painted over with a little peephole scratched in the paint. I look through it and it's my Aunt B's in-law, Jeff. I open the door and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" He asks me if my mum or Dale, my mum's boyfriend, are home, and I said no, that my mum was at work and God knows where Dale is, and then he asked me to come downstairs because he wanted to talk to me. I trusted him because I considered him family, and I was also pretty timid and didn't like saying no to people, so I followed him downstairs to the front porch. I see his car parked and still running on the street with the headlights on, and sitting in the passenger seat with the window rolled down was the jerky boy looking dude that hung out with my mum's boyfriend. I paused and I was like, huh. And Jeff was like, "Hey, we want to talk to you. We want to ask you something." And he started gently guiding me to the car. My adrenaline started pumping, and I all of a sudden felt that something just wasn't right. I stopped and pulled back a little and tried my best not to look scared, but Jeff kept talking sweetly, running his finger up my shoulder to fix my spaghetti strap and saying, "It's okay, just come closer to me," and I pulled away politely and said that it was okay, he can ask me right here, and he kept sweetly trying to convince me to just come to the car so that we could just talk, and said that if I was so scared I could just stand in front of the headlights. But the second that he said stand in front of the headlights, my stomach did a leap and my whole body started to feel electrically charged because I knew if I was to stand in front of the headlights, I would not be able to see and it would distract me, thus making it easy for one of them to grab me. I knew right at that moment that I was in a very dangerous situation, so I started acting ditzy and dumb because I was afraid that if they thought that I was thinking that they were going to try and do something that would land them in prison, that he would just grab me right there and cover my mouth and drag me to the car so that I wouldn't tell on him. So I started to playfully joke around and said that I wasn't wearing shoes and I didn't want to step in dog poo. And then I see Jerky Boy start to come out of his car, and then I just sprinted into the house so fucking fast and ran up the stairs and locked the door that I barely hit the ground. I was shaking so bad, and then Jerky Boy knocks on the door like a minute later, and he's looking through the makeshift peephole, and he starts saying that he needs to talk to my mum's boyfriend. I say that he wasn't home, so he goes away from the door, but I didn't hear him go down the stairs. Then, 30 seconds later, Jeff comes up and knocks and is talking through the door saying that he needed to talk to my mum's boyfriend, and he tries to open the door, but it's locked. I said that he wasn't home, again mind you, and Jeff starts saying things like, "I'm sorry we scared you, honey. We just wanted to talk to you and ask about your mum and Dale," and other bullshit excuses. I was honestly scared that they were going to try and kick the door in, so I decided that I was going to try and sneak out the back. I walked towards the back door, and thank God I looked out the back window first because I saw Jerky Boy standing down the stairs at the back door. So Jeff was at the front door sweet-talking me, and his friend was waiting by the back door. I know what you're probably thinking right now just listening to this. Call the cops, right? I don't know why I didn't. I mean, I think it was because I was so naive and timid, and this guy was my uncle, and I was also questioning myself and my judgment because Jeff kept reassuring me at the front door. So I go to the front door and Jeff is still there talking to me, telling me that he felt bad for scaring me, etc. Then I tell him through the front door, trying my best to disguise any hint of fear, that it was okay, that I was sorry and I got spooked and that it wasn't his fault, and I just tried my best to placate him and convince him that I believed him. He eventually did leave, and once the coast was clear, I snuck out and ran to my friend's house next door. I didn't tell them anything, but just said that I was scared and wanted to stay there until my mum came home. I did tell my mum though, but nothing just never really happened, and I thankfully moved to my dad's house 45 miles away 3 months later, and I've never seen him or that kid again. So this happened to me and the man that I was dating back in the late spring of 2000. I'm an avid and experienced urban explorer and have visited many different abandoned sites. This place that I'm writing about has been explored several times by others since, but when I visited, it wasn't a common knowledge location and all the buildings were still intact, except for the main house, which had, from what I had heard, burned, leaving nothing but the outer stone wall. Nothing but the outer wall remains of all the other buildings were torn down since I was there. To more recent urban explorers, it's known as the Stone Castle, and more recently, the Osler Castle. This is the name given by the Heritage Society that has decided to fix it up. So when my boyfriend at the time discovered it, he saw it in the distance from a roof that he was working on in Oro Medonta, ON, and there was, but not anymore, a large barn, a carriage house, and towards the back of the property, a stable. The first weekend we both had off together, we made the hour drive to explore it. The property was absolutely stunning too. On the top of a hill, back from the road, you could almost imagine living surrounded by such beauty, and we kind of did exactly that. The house itself was gone except for the wall, and if you looked in the basement window, you could see an old stove laying amongst the wreckage that you could tell that it had been a beautiful home at one time, to whoever owned it. Being the explorer I was, I insisted that we investigate every single corner of every single building too. And although my ex was less than enthusiastic about it, I insisted. I honestly did not see the point of driving for an hour just to look at the outside of the buildings. I wanted to go in the buildings. The first building we explored was the barn, both upstairs and down. Down in the basement of the barn is where things went from wow to holy shit really fast. In the basement, it had been used as a place for satanic sacrifices. There was satanic artwork all over and a knife with what appeared to be blood on it, and an altar with black candles, a bottle that smelled like blood, and the most disturbing piece was that whatever satanic group was using it, they had built a makeshift cage out of the silo with chains inside and everything. My boyfriend at the time wanted to get the heck out of there as fast as possible, but I convinced him to stay so that we could explore the rest of the buildings on the property. I told him that it probably was just a bunch of kids just screwing around and it was no big deal, right? Wrong. Our next step was the stables at the back of the property, and honestly, I was so caught up in my love for the exploring that he would not have been able to persuade me to leave without going into every single building, no matter what he said. I opened the door and into the stable, and the smell hit me. Just rotting flesh, and the entire room was littered with animal corpses, dogs, cats, rabbits, even coyotes and foxes, and they were just all horribly mutilated. It was absolutely the worst thing that I had ever laid my eyes on. And as soon as my boyfriend saw that, he grabbed me and said that we were leaving right at that moment, and that killing animals is not stupid kids doing stupid things, but this is some serious shit. So we started to leave, but there was one more building, and I wanted to check on the way out of the carriage house. He said no effing way we were going there and stomped off up the hill back to the main house, assuming that I would follow, but I didn't follow, and I went around the hill by myself and took a quick peek into the carriage house. The carriage house was anticlimactic, to say the least. I mean, it had absolutely nothing in it. But it was actually a good thing that I snuck off like I did, because if I hadn't, we wouldn't have seen them coming. They would have been able to sneak up on us as we were coming up the hill and do God knows what to us. The first one I noticed was an adult male with a baseball bat. He had actually opened our car door and was riffling through things in our car trying to find a key, I'm guessing. There were about 8 people, I think, in total in the group, ranging from adults that I would say were in their 30s to teenagers and probably a child no more than 12 or 13 too. They all had weapons though, golf clubs, sticks, a cane, baseball bats. I yelled at the guy what the hell he thought he was doing going through our car, and my boyfriend came charging over the hill, bless his heart, right through the posse of creeps and weirdos who seemed to be lying in wait for us. It appeared that we had ruined whatever plans they had in mind because they immediately backed off. Some even tried to hide their weapons behind their backs, which was just stupid if you ask me. I mean, who wouldn't notice a baseball bat behind someone's back, right? So baseball bat guy demanded to know what we were doing there, and I demanded to know what the hell he thought that he was doing in our car, and he didn't answer, just looked at me all nervous. And my ex-boyfriend said that we were just admiring the architecture of the house and that we were just leaving, and they let us get into our car and drive off, which in itself was a miracle. I'd say in light of what we had discovered on that property especially. They followed us in a black pickup with no plates for a good 20 minutes, and instead of heading for our home, we went to the closest city, which was Baryon, filed a report with a policeman who seemed more shaken than us, and then we just headed home. My ex never went back to that roofing job again, and he had someone else finish it, and he went to another one. I wanted to go back, but after telling people what happened, I couldn't find anyone to go with me. My ex and I continued various explorations, but we both started carrying knives after that. I still carry one to this day, even when I hike, in fact. I have not read of anyone else having a similar experience at Satan's Castle, but recently, my cousin, who is also an explorer, contacted me with a place that she wanted to explore, and guess where and guess what? We've made many arrangements to go there in the next couple of weeks, and on that note, I sure hope that I get to give you guys an update. So this happened a few years ago, close to Christmas time. I work from home and have since the early 2000s. At the time, I was renting a house in a blue-collar middle-class neighborhood. One day, my son, who was in high school at the time, woke up with a raging headache, so I let him stay home. It was mid-morning when the doorbell rang, and this wasn't unusual because the neighborhood that we lived in was kind of a prime spot for door-to-door solicitors and Jehovah's Witnesses and the like. So I yelled for my son to get it because he was just heaps better at getting rid of these types. No joke, the kid has the deadpan stare that would make the devil flinch. Then I just kind of forgot about it, but it wasn't until later that night that I even remembered it happened, and I asked my son who it was, and he said the landscaper. Gary, I said. That seemed odd because Gary lived across the street from me and ran his own landscaping business. He only came over once in the winter to do some basic maintenance, and he'd just done that the weekends before. My son said, no, the other one, his son, I think. That was even weirder. Gary's stepson had moved in with him over the summer, and I'd like to claim that my instincts were strong enough to know that something was just off about this dude. But honestly, I barely even knew he existed. Sometimes he'd helped Gary do my yard, but for the most part, we never even spoke. And him coming to my door just didn't make any sense. So I asked, what did he want? My son just kind of shrugged it off and said that he didn't say, and as soon as he opened the door that he just said sorry and left. I said, well, if it's important, I guess he'll be back. This didn't come off as anything too concerning. From what I did know of Gary's stepson, he was awkward, like no eye contact, grunting a hello awkward, and I gave a passing thought to going over to Gary's to see what he needed, but decided not to bother. It all just seemed so innocuous. And it wouldn't be until a few months later that I learned it was anything. I can't remember exactly how long after it happened, but it was probably less than a week before I got another knock on my door, again early in the morning. This time, my son was at school, so I answered it. It was a police officer, and they were canvassing the neighborhood looking for a woman who'd gone missing. But she'd gone out for a jog a few days before and just had never come home. The police were asking pretty much everyone on her route if they'd seen anything, and I looked at the picture, didn't recognize her, and let the officer know that. I never even thought about the weird visit from Gary's son because, honestly, who on earth would have connected the two, right? Well, they found the missing woman's body a few weeks later, and I learned about that on the news. Her body was left in a county burn pile, the kind that landscapers in my area used to dispose of yard waste. And that's how they traced it back to my landscaper's stepson. About a month after they found her body, he was arrested. I didn't learn about the rest until I got another knock on my door. This time, it was a police detective. He was following up because during the stepson's confession, he admitted that the woman jogger was a victim of opportunity. He'd seen her running past his house, and it was about 11 a.m. and no one was around because it was a weekday and most people in the neighborhood were at work or school. So he chased her down and abducted her. He'd also informed the detective that he'd planned to kill a woman that day. Problem was, when he went to his original target's home, her 6-foot, 230-pound teenager son answered the door instead. Realizing that trying to confront that kid would get his ass handed to him, he just went home. He waited on the porch for a while, hoping that her kid would just leave so that he could try again, but then he saw the jogger. When the detective was talking, I was detached in a "why are you telling me all this" kind of way. And then I remembered that weird visit from the landscaper's son, and I realized that I was the target that he was talking about. If my son hadn't have stayed home that day, hadn't answered the door that day, I would have been that woman that they pulled out of that brush pile. My son's testimony became pretty important too. It was used to show that the landscaper's son wasn't nuts when he committed the crime, as he was logical enough to plan out a murder. He just didn't get to kill the person that he wanted to, that person being me, obviously. I Still have a lot of guilt about everything that happened. First, because I put my son in front of a cold-blooded killer. And if that cold-blooded killer wasn't a pussy who only went after people weaker than him, that day could have gone way different. Second, because some other lady technically died in my place. Logically, I know that it wasn't my fault, but on that emotional, kind of non-logical level, I feel bad because I know if I'd opened the door that day, that lady would still be alive, but I wouldn't be. But even knowing now what I didn't know then, I still wouldn't have answered that door that day.